Welcome to the Heart of Dad podcast. Heart of Dad is a podcast for entrepreneurs who are passionate about their families and business and looking to find more clarity, more balance and more alignment in all areas of their life. Come and join the community at heartofdad.com or on Facebook at groups/Heart of Dad. This week on Heart of Dad, I'm interviewing Will McInnes. Will is the CMO at Brandwatch, a leader in digital consumer intelligence and one of Europe's most successful VC-backed software firms. Prior to that, he founded Nixon McInnes, an early innovator in social media marketing. His book, Culture Shock, published by Wiley, outlined a blueprint for practical approaches to digital transformation. He's dad to 2 boys and loves riding bikes with them, exploring new places and general adventures outdoors. So this week on Heart of Dad, I'm delighted to introduce Will McInnes. Hi, Will.
Hello.
Good to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for coming on the show, Will. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am age 42. I am very lucky to be dad to 2 boys. They are 14 and 12. Professionally, I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Brandwatch. If you haven't come across us, it's a great technology company headquartered in the UK. And before that, ran my own business and done some bits and pieces along the way, bit of speaking, bit of writing. I like the outdoors. I like riding bikes. I need lots of exercise, and I'm sure we'll come on to that when we talk about being a dad and my 2 wonderful boys and what we do together and what they need.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. A pretty brief introduction. I know there's a lot more riches in there as well. So tell us a little bit, how long have you been with Brandwatch now?
6.5 years at Brandwatch. Joined, really exciting time in the company's growth, 130 people. So well established. I quite like it. People seem to assume that I joined earlier and earlier, but it's not true. The company already had great traction, and actually what it needed was someone to help accelerate and keep sustaining that growth from a marketing point of view. And what I think was brilliant about what Giles, the founder, wanted was he wanted someone to be based in New York. Brandwatch has long had a kind of strong American presence, and we could see that the biggest deals and the most interesting and demanding sort of challenges coming from clients were in America. And so I was really lucky to do a couple of years out there with Brandwatch and then move back. And it's been an amazing growth story. It's now, we are speaking in the middle of the global pandemic, so these are uncertain times, but up until this point, we were doing more than $100 million in revenue, still led by the founder, a significant workforce in Boston and New York, offices in Singapore, Paris, Berlin, Stuttgart. I'll probably forget a few, but you get the idea. And we've acquired and we've merged and we've learned so many lessons along the way. So I feel really, with each of my career experiences, I feel some privilege and some gratitude, and I've really learned a lot in this one.
Sounds an amazing story with Brandwatch. How was it? I'm sort of curious to know, because we've both been founders of businesses and stepped into businesses where we're not the founder anymore. And what was that like for you to move from that experience into something that was more mature with at a more mature stage, should we say, with Brandwatch?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was thrilling, to be honest, because having run a 30-person company as the MD, to come in and sort of slot in and just get this sense of like an operation around you, but with still lots of the possibility and influence and excitement of being able to shape and contribute to the future path. Like it was I remember feeling almost a little bit worried about how good it felt. like, ooh, this bathwater feels really nice. Like, because I do like to think of myself as an entrepreneur, and I did and have really enjoyed initiatives that I've started myself. But to come and help someone and some people scale their initiative, it felt quite easy actually. So I suppose the worry is like, oh, maybe I'm a wing person rather than the leader or something, and that's been, well, 6.5 years of an adventure in that configuration.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think a lot of that resonates with my own experience of transitions, and there is some welcome relief when you've been, there were two of you, weren't there, for Nixon McInnes, of course, but there are 4 of us initially and 5 then with Kineo, and there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, just the wage bill, the welfare, the strategy, the product development, the services, all that's a lot. It's a lot to sit on your shoulders if you're an MD or a co-owner of a business, and to move into a space where you don't have to have all those things, or you don't have to take care of all those things, can be a welcome relief.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and it's really interesting. I think I've realized that whatever I do, team has been consistent. So I'm not a solo operator, and I know very few people are, but I crave team success. So being in different configurations, whether I'm the official leader or one of a group of people, or it's good to experience different settings, I suppose, and to try them out and see what you learn from each.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know so much about the kind of that point of transition in your life, but what was it like for you to leave the business that you'd set up and go off in a different direction? Was there an emotional kind of moment of a disconnection before you kind of set off for new waters?
Yeah. That's, as I remember it, I think it had been a long time coming. And I think one of the things I've learned about myself is that sometimes my body knows what needs to happen before my mind catches up and provides a helpful narrative. So I don't think there was much surprise, or at least not from the sort of partners or co-directors. I'd been talking about living and working abroad for a long time, and ideally taking Nixon McInnes abroad, and in particular to America. And Giles had actually approached me, the CEO of Brandwatch had approached me a year earlier than when I took the position. It was very flattering and out of the blue, and made me feel good, but it wasn't the right time. But a year later, it was the right time. And maybe in that year was where the emotional processing happened. So when it came, I was actually really ready to go. And I think I may have surprised some people in that, like, I was just ready to go. I wanted to look forwards. And so there was guilt, and the shifting of a sense of responsibility, because I felt like I was leaving those guys at a time where the business wasn't in the best shape. It wasn't like failing, but it wasn't thriving either, and to walk away did feel like walking away. But like, with hindsight now, this far down the road, I'm 100% sure that was the right decision for me, at least. So we did the farewells and stuff, but I think the reality and the truth is I was incredibly excited to get cracking on a new challenge.
Particularly in New York, it sounds. That was...
New York.
Were you off there? God, sorry.
Yeah, it was intended to be from day one. The visas inevitably took longer than that to figure out, so I did about maybe as many as sort of 5 months more in Brighton, and that worked out really well as well, just to get a sense of the company there and build the relationships there. Because then when I moved to New York, I was able to sort of bridge and be a bridge for some of the key players in the company. But New York is incredible. I'm so happy that I had that experience. Like, that is, if I hadn't had that experience, I think there would be something a little bit missing for me in my life. I think it's great. I love adventure, and I can't really claim to be much of an adventurer if I've spent my entire life living and working in like Brighton. That's not really very adventurous.
I love that. How old were your boys? They must have been quite young when you went to New York.
Yeah. How old were they? Well, they're 14 and 12 now. So yeah, like 4 and 6. They were little.
Yeah. Well, what was the process of upheaval? I mean, I'm using that word, it's a judgment, it may not have been upheaval at all, but in my mind, the moving of family from one location to another, I've done it just within the UK, it's felt like an upheaval. But what was it like for you to take your boys over to the US, and how did they adjust to it?
Oh man, that was definitely an upheaval for them. To go from a cozy school in Hove in East Sussex in the UK, where they knew everyone, they had great friendships, lots of the parents were friends, to then their first day at a gritty, under-resourced, zero green space inner city Brooklyn state school was truly shocking for them. I think the older one came out crying on the first day. They had an underground dining hall, catering area, canteen, whatever you call it, and the staff used like loud hailers to tell the kids to. The routine was they had to put their heads on the table as a way of like getting everyone to be quiet and fall into line. There were so many nice people, good, like the school for the system it was in was doing well, had good academics. There were so many good things. I'm probably making it sound horrific, but it was alarmingly different. There was no green space. There was a very small schoolyard. The boys, this is amazing to us in Europe, but you didn't get outdoor exercise every day. Like obviously when I was growing up, and I'm sure you as well, Matt, like we had 3 breaks a day and we'd run around and kick balls and scream at one another. They didn't get out every day. Like to me, that's just mind blowing. And that was because they were so constrained for space. So it was an assault on the senses and on what they were used to. But being little, they did adjust. They did take it in their stride. They thrived. Their mum provided, an amazing source of continuity and support. It was an adventure for all 4 of us. But it's definitely not. It wasn't like you show up in America and everything's easy. Like I remember us trying to come to terms with the US financial system. It's everything's checks, checkbooks, proving your identity, understanding what social security. These are like there's a lot under the surface when you move country that I learned about.
What about your own? I mean, you didn't use this word, but it sounded to me like culture shock for your boys stepping into that Brooklyn school. What about for you? Was there an element of culture shock? You talked about the financial system, but what about in kind of working ways? I mean, how was it to step into that completely new environment?
I think for me, it was all upside. Like it was really exciting. I mean, I remember like embarrassing myself in not knowing how to use the coffee machine. That every American kid grows up with one of these particular coffee makers in their house, and So and you learn what words you can and can't use, and that's often hilarious. But to be honest, so much of it was upside. Like, Americans, as we all know, so positive. The team there were incredibly talented. The scale of the opportunity in America, again, it's a cliche, but it's also true. Another cliche, the energy on the streets of New York, it is a place where you feel like, wow, I'm at the center of the universe. That is what I kept on repeating to myself and to others, was this feels like the center of the universe. And it was cool. So unless I'm remembering it in a way that is convenient to me, it was all good.
Sounds it. What brought you home?
We needed to come home. My relationship was not in a good place, and so the decision was made. We need to go home where our families are, and so that was another kind of strangely quick and easy decision. In some ways, that was probably a harder adjustment. Selfishly, for the boys, I think they slotted in and coped with yet more change really, really well. It was a shame that the younger boy couldn't go to the school where his friends were. There weren't any places, so that was a real shame. But for me, I keep looking at them, and I keep wondering, like, what has all this change, at what cost? How have you adapted so brilliantly? So I guess we have to wait and see. But they've just taken each world upheaval in their stride, it seems.
Seems to be a truism about children, have that more adaptability than adults, maybe.
Yeah.
But what about for you, Will? Because you've really spoken passionately about wanting to work abroad and the adventure of it, and being like you're at the center of the universe, and then it sounds like you're facing kind of a relationship breakdown and an end of at least at that point, at the end of the working abroad dream, as you had to come back, very pragmatically to be closer to family. How did that play out for you?
Yeah, I don't know that I've actually thought about that. How did it play out for me? Well, I suppose the privilege of the job meant that I continued to travel. So that was that sort of appetite for difference and experience and new flavors was still being met. There was comfort in returning home, given the change in the family unit, so to speak. There was a lot of comfort in being back around family and friends, a lot of stability, and working for Brandwatch in the headquarters is no bad thing either. I remember adjusting to being part of the bigger bit of Brandwatch took some time. The beauty of the New York office and the team at that time was that we had a real esprit de corps, and so becoming part of the bigger thing there was some loss in that, I guess, but there were gains too. I was closer to different members of the executive team now physically, and I don't know, like you kind of post-rationalize, don't you? But it felt like that growth spurts phase suited me being in America, and then the life settling down and business consolidation. I don't know. There's a story in my head that it all kind of made sense.
Yeah, that's amazing. I suppose what I was sort of reflecting on as you were speaking was that there were a lot of moving parts in your life at that time. There must have been, going back to the UK, adjusting to a new reality in your relationship, helping your boys adjust to that, And I was kind of tracking back to your comment about like your body letting you know ahead of your mind, and I was wondering how. I mean, I don't know how you live that experience, but to me, it sounds like it has the potential for high pressure.
Mm.
But when I sit with you and people hearing this will know, who know you and listening to will hear a very laid back Will. Kind of, you're not somebody who's white knuckling this interview or
Oh,
anything else. So I'm curious about that really.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm on a journey like anyone, I guess, but my journey at the moment as a leader and as a human, I don't think the people that work with me do think I'm laid back. I think they think I'm actually pretty demanding, and I think I wear them down. I'm wearing. I am quite a lot, and I know that about myself. And I've got kind of echoes of things my mum said when I was a kid. Like William. I think she said, William. He's lovely, um, but when he doesn't get what he wants, he's a real bastard. And so there's so I might sound laid back, and it's a philosophical conversation, and it's your questions are brilliant because they're just very reflective. um, I wish I was a bit more laid back, and you're right, there has been so much juggling, and that juggling isn't done yet, and it's exhausting, and it's taken a huge cost. And I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, you look shit. Like I can see the, not fatigue, but whatever the veneer that, like a piece of beechwood that has properly been washed around. I can see the grain, and the juggling isn't done yet. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Will. I mean, there's beauty in the grain, of course,
Mm,
and subtlety. But I love that, because I know that you set up your previous business. You're an author. You're in this very senior position in Brandwatch, and um, laid back can be a style, but there's also a kind of a steely determinism, right?
mm,
Determination.
mm,
You have to start a business and to keep it going even through the tough times,
mm,
or to be part of an organization that's growing, or even to uproot your family and take them to a completely different country. That's
mm,
all those things require a steeliness in
mm.
my experience.
Yeah.
I mean, you've just been alluding to how things are still, if not unraveling, at least settling or working themselves through. What would you say are the most challenging things at the moment in terms of kind of the aftershocks of separation
Mm.
and how that plays out?
Yeah. I suppose the the biggest thing right now is just that, and I won't go into it in detail because it's not really um, for public, but the post separation divorce is a process in itself, and that isn't complete yet. So there's a sense of there's a sense of incompleteness. That is a great weight. Um, one of the great gifts of being with a company as it scales is that you see different phases, and I've moved through a lot of phases with Brandwatch, and it's going to be really interesting to see where that gets to. So in some ways, it's not the same as the previous topic, but in some ways that is still playing out, that is still in motion. And right now, here we are in the pandemic, and life is on hold. So yeah, something about endings and beginnings, and I think I wanted a life where there were like clear moments in time where um, things reached a very defined state, and that there was, you know, real clear punctuation, and then lots of line breaks and a nice big breathing space. And that's definitely not been my life story. You know, I had 0 days off between finishing at McInnes and starting at Brandwatch. I've had an incredible run with Brandwatch, and that run continues. So there are times where I just think, will I breathe at some point? Like, will I have a proper sit down? And all of that sounds slightly indulgent, because I do get time off, and I do have a high level of influence over how I spend my time and stuff. But yeah, I wouldn't mind a break at some point.
It's really interesting, because I think you're talking at a deeper level. It's not just about the nature of holidays and time off. It's kind of that almost existential longing for a pause point, you know, where you can really inhale and exhale, take stock. And it's funny, as you're talking about that, I was thinking, like, you know, I think you said you're 42, aren't you, at the beginning of the so you've had this transition of marriage, you've had this transition of career, and it's kind of, then there's been that sort of break point of going into your 40s, which you know, without sort of hashing too many cliches, can be quite monumental. Certainly, it was big. It was big for me, I would say. Lots of, you know, big relationship change at 40. We hadn't sold Kineo at that point, but I didn't know at the time, but we were in the home stretch. I was starting to train as a psychotherapist at that point, and really thinking about the next stage of my life. So I was kind of curious about, you know, what's been playing out for you. Has that transition into your 40s impacted you in any way, or has it passed by kind of fairly innocuously?
Yeah, I suppose the kind of interesting thing for me to reflect on is that even as I talk about wanting a pause, I've got notebooks full of snippets of ideas of new initiatives to spin up. And so I suppose I'm learning, or not even learning, I just know that I'm relentlessly in pursuit of something. So it's me that means I haven't had a pause. Like, I'm already thinking about, like, oh, I should do this podcast, or of course, or you know, where's that blog series that I half started? I should reboot that, or, you know, and also getting into indoor cycling, after getting into long distance running, after getting into, like, I do it to myself. As for the 40s, I think it's still playing out for me. I mean, I've already done some of the classic midlife crisis stuff, you know. I think I'm not yet accepting of something I've not yet accepted around the extent to which I've aged, which sounds tragic and probably a bit melodramatic, but it's interesting, aging. It's like, you don't really think it's a big deal until it starts to kick in, and then you're like, oh, that's why people go on about it so much. So for me, let me give an example. I have a kind of sporting dimension to me. You know, I played rugby, and then I got into mountain biking, and you know, bits and pieces, weights and stuff, CrossFit, usual predictable cliches. but I have to do that stuff. That is integral to my mental health and my physical health. And I notice the thing I'm still coming to terms with when it comes to my age is recovery time and just like workload capacity. And you know, I was never the fittest or the strongest or whatever, but like it's interesting coming to terms with actually like the tide is turning on that front, and you do feel sorer, and I do make more noises when I get up and sit down. It's like no, I don't want to be like that. I want to be, you know, I want to be this thriving athlete, and I'm not.
Yeah, I think anybody listening who's crossed that threshold will know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. So there's something about I don't think you're saying this, but I'm wondering about it. It's like, you know, whether it's hard to accept sometimes where we are, you know, particularly if you're driven, you're demanding of yourself. That's what I'm hearing. Like demanding of others around you, in a positive way. And then there comes a point where actually those demands, kind of, there's a disconnect in the narrative, almost like there's where your mind thinks you are, and there's actually where your body is.
Yeah, it's like tough. That's exactly it. It's like there's a really good Harvard Business Review article on different styles of leadership, and I think there are 7, maybe 6, and one of them is pace setting. I don't think that's one of the ones they recommend, and it's not the only leadership style that I have. But I think I have been used to a mode of living and leading and whatever else you want to put in there, where my capacity, like it's the rugby thing. It's like we are a team and I'm on the pitch too. And if I expect you to put in those tackles, I'll be putting them in too. And I think that's what I'm going to have to change at some point and that's okay. It opens up huge opportunities, like beautifully in this moment. I've just realized that just before the pandemic, I qualified as an RFU coach. And I guess that's the poetic version of realizing that you might not be on the pitch anymore, but there's a different way to leverage your passion and your experience. And so I suppose if I think about the future and I start to wonder, like, will I ever write that fiction, or will I ever start that multi-million-pound entrepreneurial initiative, or whatever the next thing is? It might not be that how I do it will have been the way I would have done it before, which would have been through sheer force. Like, I think I will do what older people need to do, which is be more thoughtful and more deliberate, and wiser.
I don't know if you're ever been a Trekkie fan, but it's like Kirk versus Picard, isn't it? Really, you're talking about. You're entering the Picard phase.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, I love the analogy of the ref on the pitch, though. It's a nice way of leveraging your passions in different ways. Yeah. How's that all played out in terms of your relationship with your sons? Because I'm a dad to a younger son than you and a bit older than you, and I certainly am aware of my physical limitations that I may have taken for granted. Earlier stages in my life.
Yeah, we haven't quite got to the point where I know that, having read other people's autobiographies and stuff, like there are these pivotal moments. In fact, it was an article I remember reading an article, maybe it was even like Ronald Reagan or one of the Kennedys or some American politician, and him and his dad used to swim in the pool every day, and then one day he beat his dad in the pool, and that was, we haven't really, this stuff hasn't really shown up yet in my relationship with the boys. It's not, we're we like to ride bikes a lot. We like to go camping, and I'm not yet holding them back. But that will come. At the moment, I'm still like, I probably seem like very fit and able to them, but I know that moment will come where it's like, come on, Dad. Whereas at the moment, it's still like, let's slow down.
Yeah.
For the one at the back. So at the moment, we're at this really nice point where it's about. I suppose I've been thinking about my job as a parent as opening their eyes to different experiences, like opening doors and helping them go through those doors and see what's on the other side. And so through different outdoor pursuits, through different indoor pursuits, I'm trying to cultivate their interests and their passions where they lead, and trying to enable those, but also trying to put things in front of them that they might go for. So, you know, I was talking to the younger one about rugby for a while, and then he came out of the blue and surprised me by saying he wanted to try rugby, and he's really taken to it, and that's wonderful. We went on a holiday in the Highlands, which was a first for all of us, and we did a sleeper train, which was enormously exciting, and we did a whole bunch of things on that holiday, and it was as wonderful as you might imagine. We hired a Land Rover with a tent on the roof, and we drove around with no real plan and just went to incredible places that people had told us about. And one day we drove past Ben Nevis mountain biking centre, and they seemed really keen on going in, and so we camped up, and the next day we went in and hired bikes, and ever since they've been hugely passionate about riding bikes. And so I suppose I would like to do more of that. Like, more recently they've been cooking. They decided, you know, there's so much stuff on YouTube, but like both of the boys really like watching sort of these food guys on YouTube. And so you know, they decided they wanted to make a lasagna dish size millionaire shortbread. And it was so awesome because it was like their idea. I helped make it happen. They cooked it, and I helped, and it tasted tasty AF. And that to me is success. Like, that is self-initiated, and they can now make millionaire shortbread. Like, I couldn't really cook when I got to uni. I could make a bacon sandwich or whatever, but like, these boys can already knock out some fairly good dishes. And I'm like, these are the things. These are the things that I'm proud of, and I'm happy about for them.
Mm. One question I had for you, you know, when you were talking about yourself earlier, you know, you mentioned about being demanding of yourself, and maybe demanding of those around. Have you, well, there's a question, have you tempered that with your kids? Have you found a different side to yourself? Because, like, you know, I know that side of my personality has at times played out in my family life. Not always well, sometimes well, but yeah, curious to hear about your experience.
Yeah, there's no. I mean, one of the great strengths that I have is my biggest weakness, and that is that I am authentically. And it's hard for me to pretend to not feel however I feel. And however I feel, people will pretty much pick up on it. So there's no faking it. I can temper, I can moderate, and I can try and breathe and remember, and I can try and be thoughtful. Inevitably, I'm sure I am demanding of the boys some of the time. I think that fortunately, parenting brings out a very gentle and nurturing side in me too. So I think a lot of the time I'm not that demanding, but I have noticed in this homeschooling phase that I am immovable on some things. Like, we are going to start school at the same time that you would normally start school. And if that particular subject hasn't had decent work set by the teacher, then you're going to find some, or we're going to find some work for you to do on that topic. And if we can't do that, then you know what the list of alternatives is, which is read a book, do some coding, make some music, or pretty much nothing else. So it's kind of like, and occasionally I notice if a line is crossed, like my tone will shift, and that can be a jolt sometimes for them, because there's this sort of warm, nurturing, everything's lovely and enabling, and then suddenly it's like, no. And I only catch how rapidly that tone shifted by their reaction, which is like eyebrows raised, like, whoa. So yeah, it's definitely there. I do ask them questions about stuff like this, and they're always just really strangely positive. So I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll find out when, like, one day they're older and really up for telling me how it all was.
Well, it sounds like you have a good sense of your own kind of calibrating yourself and knowing when things start sort of crossing a line between kind of positive encouragement into sort of something more directive, should we say?
Very directive. I was just thinking about directive. I was wondering if you were going to say that. Yeah, that is it. I get directive when boundaries are crossed, I guess. When lines are crossed, it's like, all of that other stuff kicks in.
You mentioned your mum. It's a lovely little quote you shared about kind of your stubbornness earlier. Was your dad around when you were a kid? And
yeah, I was thinking about that. I was thinking, how many stories am I going to tell about my mum? And then I was thinking, that's interesting, because in this sort of domain, I don't really think about my dad like that. Like my dad is a very jolly character and incredibly well-read. He's kind of like a non-patronizing intellectual, I suppose, or something. He would hate that, but like, yeah, he's and growing up, his role was to be the point of final escalation. So mum would take care of, like, the day-to-day stuff, but if you were really in trouble, then dad was involved. So like the time I wrote something nasty about my Spanish teacher on the front cover of my mock Spanish GCSE paper and handed it in, it's kind of a really dumb thing to do. It was my dad who was stood in the kitchen with it in his hand, waiting for me to walk into the kitchen. So dad was around and contributed hugely to our upbringing. I think that anyone who's met my mum, some of my brother's best friends still won't ring the doorbell because they're scared of my mum. And it's hilarious because she's such a nice person, but she's very, very blunt and very direct. And that's given me such an advantage because I grew up with a very, very strong female role model and absolutely love it. Like I love direct conversations, and I love people who tell the truth, and I'm not intimidated by all kinds of characters, board members, investors, and I'm a huge, I hope, an ally. I want to be an ally for women to be as strong as my mum is and was. And I want to be as chilled out and find the pauses that my dad did. So I guess there are different things that you take or aspire to.
Yeah, beautifully said. We've kind of been skirting around this, but I've been asking dads on the podcast about their relationship with anger. I've been quite open with my guests and on the podcast about how perhaps being a dad has pushed me into spaces of anger that I never knew I really could occupy. And in fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, and we were talking about the loss of control being a big trigger point. And I don't want to make this assumption about you, Will, but I know for me, when I've been demanding of myself, then I can also have a relationship with anger, which is like if I don't get where I want to be, or other people who I have expectations of don't get where I want them to be, then that can trip me into spaces of anger. And would you be willing to explore a little bit together, like what your relationship with anger is and how it plays out in your life?
Let's have a go.
Cool. So, I mean, I just kind of gave an example of how things play out in my life, but what about you? How are you with anger? Does it play a role in your day-to-day life? Is it a relative stranger in your experience?
No, I wouldn't say it's a stranger, and I wouldn't say I have the experience you have, which is that it played a surprising role as a parent. I definitely get angry. I'm realizing as soon as you started talking about anger, I was realizing that I haven't really thought about the kind of root causes. Like, what are my common threads? What are the common patterns to me? But people who work with me, people who live with me, friends, they all know that, like, yeah, there's a switch or a line or whatever, and I do definitely get angry. What is the root causes? The thing that tends to frustrate me most is a sense that something has happened that's not gone how I wanted it to go, but through, like, willfully, like deliberately, or through kind of really disappointing lack of something that was very available. So for me, I'm never angry if I guess if certain conditions are met, which sounds ridiculous, but if I think that someone's been upfront and tried, and this is what it is, then I like to think that I'm absolutely fine with that. For me, it's if we kind of fetch the ball out of the back of the net and then kick it straight back into our own goal, and then fetch it out and then kick it straight back in again. So the things that frustrate me are when I feel like it was so within our capacity for it to have gone the way we wanted it to, and it hasn't. And when it comes to parenting, there's similarities, as of course, as you'd expect. Like, the thing I want my kids to know, and I've been talking to them about with the homeschooling, is just ask for help. Ask for help. But if I'm told, like, half an hour later that for the last half an hour, the webinar that the school sent them, software won't start, and yada yada yada, then that wouldn't be an angry moment, but that would be I'd start to get short. I'd start to be frustrated. I'd be like, my answers will get much more clipped, and I will become more directive, and I'll be like, well, what's going on? I think like full anger would be if one of the boys had sort of flagrantly and consciously decided to just do something that they knew I didn't want them to do. That would be I don't know. I mean, depending on how extreme it was, I might move past anger into just total bewilderment, because they're not really like that, or they haven't been yet. I suppose they haven't hit teenage years yet, like full blown. Yeah, where does that? What? Chuck me a question, because I've ambled a little bit there, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, it was really interesting. I suppose what I heard in that is that there's something around there's something around boundaries, which I think is really normal in parenting. They see boundaries are crossed. And in the work environment, it sounds like it's really about commitment. That people are, have they got full skin in the game when they're doing something? Have they given themselves the best chance to succeed? And if they don't play full out in that, then that riles you.
Definitely commitment, yeah, and fairness. Fairness is another one for me. It has a kind of weird power for me if I think things are unfair. Yeah.
Interesting. We're kind of coming up to the end of the time, but I had a final question. I don't know if you're open to talking about this, but you mentioned before we hit the record that you're in a new relationship, and I don't know how new it is, but another relationship. How's that played out with your boys? Have you managed kind of the introduction of something new into your life?
Yeah, really, really well, and I'm so glad that that's the way it is. They've all each been really wonderful, and it feels so natural. I think that my new partner Georgia and I were like really thoughtful about how what the most respectful and kind of appropriate and gentle way would be for her to first meet the boys, and it's just been really, really good. I don't know what the formula was, but it's gone really well. And there are always, a bit like we were talking about at the start about phases, there are more phases to move through. A big one was moving. We've moved into a home that Georgia and I chose together, and so that's the start of another phase, because the first house that we all lived in together, I'd chosen on my own when it was just me and the boys, and so I suppose I can see that we keep moving into sort of deeper and more interesting states, and in this what that move meant was, it meant that the next level of, I don't know how you would call it, like it would just, I think it would allow, this is now like somewhere that Georgia has a voice for how she wants the house to be and what the kind of shared rules are, and that opens up new pathways, I suppose. It means that we all need to talk to one another, rather than, for the difficult topics, it come through me, and it means that, I don't know what else it means, but that's what pops up for me. And there are still milestones, and bridges that we haven't crossed. We haven't been on a holiday together yet. We've been on an overnight camping trip, so there's always a kind of, I suppose, a deeper state to reach. But the boys have been incredible, and I'm amazed that Georgia just has sort of willingly accepted this environment, because I can't fully get out of my own head and look at the situation and see it as clearly as an independent person could, but to take on the responsibilities that come with a partner who has kids, that's no small matter at all. So I suppose we're just all finding our way. I will share one nugget that has been amazing for us. Is more recently, I think I came across it in an article or a podcast. This at dinner, and this sounds like I don't know, something out of an American family show in the 1950s. But at dinner, at the end of dinner, when we sit together in the evenings when the boys are here, we do this thing called Rose, Thorn, Bud, where you go around the table, doesn't matter what order, but we go around. Once the order is established, we go around one at a time. And you share a rose, something that happened that day that you really enjoyed, that you're grateful for. A thorn, something that happened that day that pissed you off, didn't go the way you wanted it to. And a bud, which is something that you're excited about for tomorrow. And that one thing alone, I think, has moved our relationships collectively to another level. And that's no sort of judgment on where we were or where we're going, but it just, not only is it wonderfully clarifying for me as a 42-year-old, it's really bonding, and you see the connections and you share in, I suppose, the inner life that each of us has. And I bloody love it, and I recommend it to anyone. Rose, Thorn, Bud. We actually do Rose, Thorn, Bud, because we want to double down on the gratitude. But,
just stop innovating, right?
Yeah. Wildly
I love it.
innovative.
I love it. I love it. It's a brilliant place to end. Will, thanks so much for coming up on the podcast, sharing so much of yourself and your life, and just being up for going anywhere that I took you in those questions. Really appreciated it.
Thank you for the interesting questions. I've really enjoyed it. It's been, I've gained new perspectives myself.
Fantastic. And where can we go to find out more about you if people want to follow up?
Oh, the internet. Twitter is probably the best first stop, at Will McInnes. Say hello.
I'll put the link in the show notes. Thanks again, Will.
Thank you very much. Take care.